Okay, as the chapter continues, we start talking about different types of costs and categories of costs. So the first one that it talks about is variable versus a fixed cost. Now, a variable cost is a cost that increases in total as the output increases and decreases in total as the output decreases. But generally speaking, a variable cost will stay the same per unit within a relevant range. Now, a relevant range, when we talk about a relevant range, we're talking about something where you don't have to expand or make major changes. So if this is, let's say this is a pizza place. So let's say this is a pizza place and the rent is $5,000 a month. And let's say that means that I can make in that facility, the size that it is, I can make 10,000 pizzas per month. So the relevant range would one of the examples of relevant range would be that 10,000 pizzas. If I go beyond that, then that would be outside my relevant range because I'm outside of I would have to add space or add facility or add elements to it. So a variable cost is a cost that increases in total as output increases and decreases in total as output decreases, but generally stays the same per unit within a relevant range. Fixed cost, on the other hand, is kind of just the opposite. A cost that does not increase as total output increases, and a cost that or does not increase as output increases and does not decrease as output decreases. But again, generally does vary on a per unit basis within a relevant range. So just to continue my example I made here, if I've got a pizza place and the rent is $5,000 per month, and that gives me the ability to make 10,000 pizzas per month, and I'm not going to do all the costs, but let's say that I've got cheese, and I'm making this overly simple, I know, because cheese would be different based on the size of pizza. It could be different based on the pizza itself, the style of pizza, the crust of pizza. So we're just going real basic here and just saying that every pizza that I make costs me $1.50 in cheese. So this is on a per pizza basis. Let's say that it cost me 50 cents in sauce. And let's say that the crust or the dough cost me 25 cents. This is all per pizza. So why I wanted to show you this example is because this is obviously oversimplified. I'd have multiple kinds of pizzas. I'd have multiple sizes of pizzas. I have different types of crust. I'd have different types of sauce. I could have different types of cheese. I have all kinds of different things. But simply speaking, on a basic level, these would be what we would call variable cost. And the rent would be a fixed cost. So what I can do is I could run this through and say, well, approximately how much am I going to spend if I make a certain number of pizzas? Well, let's say that I sell and make 6,000 pizzas for this month. So 6,000 pizzas is how many I make. What is my total variable cost going to be? Well, every single one of these, the cheese, the sauce, the crust, the dough, these are all on a per pizza basis. So I can say the total variable cost per pizza, I can just add those three up. So 1.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.25 is $2.25. So the total variable cost at a manufacturing level of 6,000 pizzas, I can simply just take 225 times 6,000. So that would be my total variable cost of 13,500. My total fixed cost, assuming this is all my fixed cost, and I'm just making that assumption right now, that rent is all my fixed cost. My fixed cost is $5,000. So I've got a total variable cost and a total fixed cost. Now I can also find the variable cost per unit, which I kind of did up above already, but just to do it again here, total variable cost divided by the number of pizzas should get me back to 225, and my fixed cost per unit. So I'm taking the 5,000 divided by 6,000. So 83.3 cents So this would both be per pizza. I wanted to show you this because when we create this cost function, and we'll be doing this a fair amount in future chapters too, you'll notice that no matter what I do, as long as I'm underneath this 10,000, and actually in this formula, it wouldn't matter even if I wasn't, but as long as I'm within my relevant range of 10,000, no matter what I do to this, the number of pizzas, what you'll see is my total variable cost will change, but my variable cost per unit doesn't change. So I'm going to highlight those. So my total variable cost and my variable cost per unit. And if I change this to being 5,000 pizzas instead, notice this went down. It was 13.5, now it's 11,250, but my variable cost per unit did not go down. Now to highlight these separately, these in a different color, let's go back to 6,000 and notice that my fixed cost is 5,000. My fixed cost per unit is 85 cents. But when I change this to 5,000 pizzas instead, my total fixed cost didn't change, but my fixed cost per unit did. So notice that effectively what we're saying is the total here changes with volume, and the total here changes with volume. The volume difference, meaning the number of pizzas sold in this case. And these two do not change based on volume or output, or I mean, there's several different ways you can say that, but those do not change. So that's our separation between fixed cost and variable cost, and just kind of a short example of exactly how that works. I can change this number to whatever I want it to be, and you'll see no matter what I do to this number, I'm still going to have $2.25 per pizza, but this variable cost in total is going to change every time. Okay, and also notice no matter what I do here, that my total fixed cost doesn't change, no matter what my number of pizzas is, but my fixed cost per unit changes every time I make a change on how many actual pizzas I sold. Okay, so that's the short version of variable cost versus fixed cost. Now, moving on to product cost. Product cost is the three components of manufacturing cost, and we'll be using this over and over and over again this entire class, so make sure you know this well. And that is direct materials, direct labor, and factory overhead. Direct materials, kind of exactly like it sounds like. We already defined direct costs in a prior video, so things that can be directly traced to the product, and in this case, specifically the materials. So not people working on it, but the actual physical, generally tangible materials that I'm utilizing in order to manufacture this product. I add that to my direct labor, which again is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It is a direct cost that can be traced, but it is physical labor of individuals, but it has to be able to be directly traced to that product. Plus my manufacturing overhead. And manufacturing overhead is basically the indirect cost, the cost that I cannot trace. Another name for indirect cost is overhead. And so the manufacturing overhead is cost other than direct materials and direct labor that are incurred in the manufacturing process. So it is important to understand that it does still need to be part of the manufacturing process. So if I have that furniture facility that I talked about earlier, and I've got the manufacturing facility that does all the actual manufacturing of the furniture, anything that pertains to that, electricity or heating and cooling, or anything that pertains to the manufacturing facility itself is manufacturing overhead, based on the examples I just gave. But if I have an administrative building too, the electricity for that and the heating and cooling for that would not be included, because while it is a similar cost, it is not part of the manufacturing process. So it needs to be part of the manufacturing process in order to be, and so it has to be incurred in that manufacturing process in order to be allocated to that product cost. So product cost is direct labor, direct materials, and manufacturing overhead. The problems can ask you, like usual, to find that individually, or can ask you to find it per unit. If it asks you to find it per unit, it just means take the total and divide it by the number of units that were manufactured. Okay, prime cost. Prime cost is direct materials and direct labor. Okay, so basically all of my direct costs, direct materials and direct labor is my prime cost. My period costs are costs that are used up and generated revenue during the current period and that are not involved in a manufacturing product. This is like my selling general administrative. This is where that other element I talked about, that administrative building on that furniture facility, that's where those costs would go into period costs, not into my product cost or my prime cost, but my period cost. Okay, we'll stop this video there for now.